So it's going to last, we'll keep it pretty short, 35 minutes or so. How do you pronounce your last name, by the way?
Somebody suggested that maybe, now that I've gone out on my own, as a publicist, that I should just, start pronouncing it that way. Yes,
Borchet.
exactly. Julia. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Are you French? Is that?
A little bit, yes, part French, but my mother is almost completely Irish. So,
Right. European.
yeah, it's
That's
pretty
probably
European. Yeah.
If you go back far enough, we're all Pangean. Well, this is how the arts were won. If you listen closely, you can hear that the echo of silence. That is because Michelle Daniel is unfortunately not here, but I'm here, everyone's favorite host. No audience to back me up. Anyway, we have a wonderful guest on today. It's the first publicist, I believe, that we've ever had on, and we're keeping with the theme of publishing guests this year. So Julia Borcherts is here. She's the founder of Julia Publicity. Very easy name to conceptualize. She previously served as publicity manager for K Publicity from 2014 to this year, where she led campaigns for more than 100 authors and publishers. She is to summarize, she's a Chicago person. She graduated from Columbia College Chicago. She worked for 10 years as a daily columnist for several Chicago Tribune publications and as a frequent contributor to Time Out Chicago, Windy City Times, and many other media outlets, probably with spins on Chicago monikers in it. She is an adjunct professor at Creative Writing and Publishing program at DePaul and in the Department of Creative Writing at Columbia College Chicago. She regularly speaks at conferences and workshops, which is where I met her. And she is, by all accounts, very highly respected and one of the greatest publicity people who ever lived. Is that too much, Julia?
No, that is not too much at all. In fact, I think that's pretty accurate. So
yeah,
thank
you. Top
yes.
100 all time.
Yeah, exactly. There we go.
So, well, thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yes. Well, we met in New Orleans at BoucherCon, which, if I'm not mistaken, was your first BoucherCon, you said?
It was my first BoucherCon in 10 years. So I had been twice to BoucherCon, 11 years ago and then 10 years ago. And the time that I had been previously was also in New Orleans. And then I had been to other conferences in the meantime, but not to that one. So I was delighted to be back there.
Yeah. Did you vibe with New Orleans?
Oh, yeah. I love New Orleans. I think it's such a cool city, and it's perfect for a crime fiction conference, right? It just has that noir feel.
It did. I didn't love it. But we won't talk about it. It was fun. The city was wonderful. The Southern hospitality cliche is quite true, I think.
Yeah. Was that your first BoucherCon or?
No, that was my fourth BoucherCon, third BoucherCon. Been going for the last few years, San Diego, which was great, and Nashville was great, and New Orleans was fine. It's a lot.
Well, and trying to work in a conference on top of all that city.
Yes.
I mean, it's just there is a lot of FOMO there, like if you don't go out and do all the things that are so essentially New Orleans that you're missing something. But then we were at a multi-track conference panel where there were, or conference events where there were, 5 or 6 panels going on at a time and like all different kinds of things. So there's also a whole lot of FOMO going on with the conference itself.
I personally didn't have any FOMO. I did it all. And I think that was mistake number one. Too many pralines at Loretta's. If you haven't been Loretta's pralines, highly recommended. French market. So a lot of authors, especially new authors, don't really understand the publicity world, the PR world, the marketing world. Sadly, a lot of them. What's kind of your day-to-day as far as working with clients and so forth?
Sure. So, and I agree that's true. I think a lot of authors come up through, possibly some type of a writing program where they teach you the art and the craft, but they, or you have writers groups, with friends and critique groups and things like that, but they don't necessarily teach you the business part of it. And there is a lot that goes on with that. And with publicity, I think a lot of what I'm doing is, certainly reaching out to traditional media to get, coverage for people's books. I'm also looking at like the author's online presence to see, like what they can do to make sure that they're positioned correctly, that it makes it easy for people to looking for them, to find them and to buy their books.
Hmm.
And then also arranging for events, for them so that they can be out in public, whether it's at a festival or a conference, such as VoucherCon,
Hmm.
or, perhaps like a festival in a city, like the Tucson Festival of Books or the Los Angeles Times
Sure.
Festival of Books, the Printers Row Book Festival, and Chicago, Brooklyn Book Festival in New York. So a lot of different types of festivals all over the country, but then also to their personal events, like for them to have
Yeah.
a launch party, or if there are, library events or things like that, or other cities that they want to be a part of. So it's kind of
Yeah.
a three-part approach. It's traditional media, and then marketing and social media outreach, and then community outreach, which is the events.
Which is so look, there's a lot of time and a lot of money spent there as well, right? We can't argue that. That's it.
I
Good luck,
know.
writers. No, so what would your advice to them be to like try and mitigate and like what they should be focusing on if they are on like a limited budget, limited time?
Sure. So I think the things, what they want to do is as soon as they either land a contract or decide to self-publish, it's two different routes there. But if they land a contract somewhere, generally it'll be agented.
Mhm.
So they should talk to their agent about like what's in the contract with the publisher, how much publicity and marketing is the publisher providing.
How
Oh,
much?
go
Yeah,
ahead.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
interrupt to ask you the question that you're probably just already going to answer. In this current landscape, how often do publishers really put forth any sort of significant marketing power behind a new or debut author?
That's an excellent question. And yes, you're right. That was the first thing I was thinking of is
Yes.
that a lot of times, well, very few people in publishing are getting rich on publishing. They're almost all doing it for the love of it. And
Mhm.
so they do as much as they can do within the constraints of what they've got, right? So
Yeah.
a lot of it, sad to say, a lot of it is driven by the amount of money that is invested in the book. So if the author
Hmm.
got a huge advance, then the publisher is probably going to spend an equal amount of money promoting the book
Mm.
themselves because they have that big investment, to protect.
An equal amount, you think, on average?
Well, or a good amount anyway.
Yeah.
It's like if it's somebody, um, if they've got the go ahead to offer a large contract to an author based on whatever it is that they feel, is going to make that debut really hit with the splash, then they will have the approval to have a larger budget. So they will be able to do
Mhm.
things like arrange a book tour or, pay for advertising or, like all kinds of, different things or
Yeah.
assign a couple people to the account. Most times it's somebody, if it's an indie publisher, like a reputable independent
Hmm.
crime fiction house, they will have a couple people working on maybe whatever the season's catalog is. So their time is divided between all of them. So they usually welcome having an outside person if it's in the author's budget.
Yeah.
So a lot of times they're able to do the basics, like submit to the trade publications, hoping for a review. They can sometimes at least send maybe a widget out or like a digital copy out
Hmm.
to whoever their trusted contacts are. They may have a social media list. There may be a little marketing that they invest in, like maybe a Goodreads giveaway or some type of Amazon promotion.
Right.
But they don't often have a huge amount of resources. So it's good for the author to check with their agent because the agent will know exactly, they'll have experience with that publisher. And the
Yeah.
agent can guide them saying, you'll want to do some things on your own or you'll want to hire someone to help you or you got it covered,
Hmm.
so and I think it does help for the author to know to ask those questions. And I think that's what seems overwhelming sometimes to authors is that they don't even know what questions to ask,
Right.
and so.
I
so it
think
helps.
they're rightfully so focused on writing as
Yeah.
good a book as they can,
Hmm.
that all this becomes secondary. And as someone who's querying now with their own book,
Yeah.
after many, many years of not writing fiction, it's been beneficial to have to be running pipeline, book pipeline, and so forth, and having that sort of bird's eye view of the industry.
Mhm.
Not a lot of writers do, so there's a lot of hand holding. How many new clients do you have that like really do need that extra like this is how things work 101?
Well, all of them. I think,
Okay, good.
so I've done a lot of different, like it can be, I mean, there are several book publicists and
Mhm.
many that work with crime fiction novelists and, some have specialties, but most publicists work with many different, they have their favorites, right?
Yeah,
That they enjoy working with. And so I think that what happens is that they will want to look at, first of all, is their website in order? Do they have a website that looks professional, that is, like if somebody just casually looks at it, does it have the information that's needed? Can people easily get to like the pre-order of the book?
and to clarify, they do need
Yeah,
every author does need a website at
they
this
should
point.
have a website
Okay.
and they don't need to be on every social media platform. Whatever platforms they're on already are probably good enough.
Okay, let me ask you that.
Yeah.
So the
Hmm.
inevitably, I was going to bring up TikTok. How important is
Yeah.
TikTok now compared to like 3 or 4 years ago?
Well, the thing is that a publicist or the publicist, the inside publicist at that publishing house or the personal publicist should have be doing outreach to book talkers, bookstagrammers, and booktubers. Those are the three
Sure.
platforms where book influencers show up. But the
Yeah.
thing is as long as I think most of the book talkers have Instagram accounts. That's really kind of where they grew out of.
Yeah.
So as long as the author has one or the other, they don't need to be active, particularly on those platforms, but the influencer needs to be able to find them and tag them.
Gotcha.
So they don't need to, like you don't need to be it's different. Social media changes like every 6 months, and each
Right.
platform is important. And TikTok is where a lot of that comes in. But at the same time, it's not important for the author to turn themselves into a TikTok star.
There you go. Yeah.
Like they can, have nice, if you want to post little videos about different things, you can post a video of, yourself holding your manuscript or,
Yeah.
reading from
Unboxing.
something for 30
Yeah.
seconds, unboxing for sure.
Sure.
But you don't need to develop a huge following yourself. Reaching out to influencers will help grow, whatever audience you have. And I think too, just being a good literary citizen, being part of the community, like following the authors you admire, following the people
Hmm.
you know, liking their posts, commenting when it's appropriate. If they have good news to share, sharing that too. Like, oh, here's my friend so and so, their book launched today, and I can't wait to read it. And here's the cover, or something.
Yeah. Being a
And
good literary citizen. I
yeah,
haven't heard
yeah,
that phrase before. I'm going to steal it. I'm sorry.
it's so good, right? Like, that's
Yeah.
the whole thing, I think, with social media is that, as long as you're showing up once a week, even, and paying
Hmm.
attention to other people, what's everybody else doing? Because nobody wants to be like that guy who's like, buy my book, buy my book, buy my book,
Oh, there
So
are so many that
there,
guys and
I
that
know
girls
there
out there.
are. And so, publicists usually try to help. It's one of the things that they do is look at, where the authors show up online and just be like,
Yeah.
okay, you can do a little more of this, and to be honest, even though there's a lot of that guy, there
Hmm.
are also a lot of authors who are very shy. They feel like they don't want to be inundating people or,
Hmm.
aggravating people. And so there's a, you can also be too quiet.
There's a balance. Yeah.
There is a balance, but a publicist will help make other people aware of, to help grow your audience, whereas your own presence on those platforms, that's how you mobilize your own audience that you already have. So, like
Yeah.
creating content on TikTok is not going to grow your audience, it's just going to inform the people who already follow you, your friends,
Right.
whatever,
I want to
of your news.
yeah, I want to underscore that too. Like, I think a lot of authors think like, well, I don't like social media, so I'm not going to be like an influencer. And it's like, you don't have to be an influencer. You hire a PR
No.
person and they do all that for you. And you're going to spend thousands of dollars, but that's the deal, right? Um, if you're a filmmaker and you want to make a short film, you're going to be spending 10 times that anyway. So it's just, I think a lot of writers have to understand there's a time investment and there's a monetary investment, and a mental capacity investment. If you've been to conferences, you know what I'm talking about, that goes along with with your actual writing, right? You've created a business in a weird way when you write a book.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like in marketing terms, it's like you have a brand now. So,
Yes.
it's like your brand and you want your brand to be, to use a marketing term, you want your brand to reflect, to have everything you do reflect who you are as an author and as a person. Like you want your values to come through. You want the things that if people run across you, that they will feel your target audience for your book will feel like, oh, this is someone whose book I want to read. Right. So I think that, it's true that it does cost money to hire, and publicists come in all different types of, you can, get all different types of coverage, at all different price points. Different publicists have different ways that they work and have different price points, so some are, I mean, you can apply to have a publicist who, will only, work with maybe 3 or 4 authors a year and charge like 30,000 a month,
Right.
that's a lot of money. You can also, one of the things I've done for authors that are on a budget is a like do-it-yourself plan. And which also works very well for authors who are self-published because it's tailored and it like gives you all the contacts and the talking points and a calendar and everything. But it's the author's boots on the ground,
Wow.
But then, the other thing to think about too. So that's something, like for someone who's on a budget, because I never would recommend that somebody put their mortgage at risk in order to hopefully get a bestseller. It's like publicity is never guaranteed. It will, no matter what, it's going to elevate your presence somewhat.
Yeah.
But, like it's not something it's something that you should have in the budget. It shouldn't be something where you're risking anything like financial stability.
Yeah. It's not the lottery. You're not going to
No.
increase your odds necessarily by spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on your book, especially if it's a debut. I think you kind of need to build an audience first, and then you can kind of incrementally step up, I would think.
Well, I think that's true. I think that authors, for a debut, a lot of times, investing in a publicist, you may not make your money back. You may not hit, but you may not hit the New York Times bestseller list. But what you may get is a better contract for your next book, or
build your audience. You can build
awareness. Yeah. So it's different, and that is one of the things too, particularly with crime fiction. If someone is writing a series, it's really, I've worked with many series authors, and the awareness of them does build, over time. Like having a publicist for the first one is pretty good. But then by the time they get to the third or the fourth book, it's like if the publicist is able to, if the author is willing to pair with the publicist in such a way that they both come up with a strategy that, they both agree on and that should work well, then it really can be a career builder as opposed to like a one shot, here's what's happening.
Sure. And you work mostly with crime authors, right?
I work with many, many crime authors and have over the course of my time as a publicist. But I also work with other genres too. I have worked with pretty much every type of, worked with a lot of horror novelists, romance, literary fiction, poetry. I would say a memoir, biography.
Erotica.
Like
you do a lot of
I have done erotica. Yes, I have. And what
Yeah.
happens sometimes though is that like one time the erotica author was also a young adult author. And so it was like a highly guarded secret, like 2 separate names, 2 separate brands.
Not a combined genre.
No, yeah.
We're not writing erotica.
No, she'd be in jail right now if that was the case, So, but yeah, so it's been, it's interesting. I will say though, that you mentioned the idea of that it's not only an investment of time, or money, but it's also an investment of time. And I think that's true. Sometimes people think that they are going to hire a publicist and the publicist will just make everything happen and they don't have to do anything. And that is the case. Like if you're a celebrity, maybe your publicist is just planting items or something.
Yeah, if you're Beyonce, you don't have to go.
Right. Exactly. Like she doesn't have to, it's like people just,
they forever.
Right, exactly. They've heard of her, you just feed it out. But for an author, a lot of times, what's happening is that we're getting interviews for them. They perhaps a podcast appearance on, a podcast such as this one,
Sure.
or many other types of interviews that could come up. Or maybe we're writing guest columns that address like some themes and topics in the book that would be, of interest to people in areas that don't normally run book reviews. So
Mhm.
there are, and they will have to, perhaps, reach out to people and ask them if they want to be a conversation partner, like at an event or
Right. I've done
so
that
there's,
a handful
yeah,
of times too. Yeah.
yes, for sure. So there's a lot of things that a publicist, if the publicist is good, they will actually make more work for you, and that's a little startling sometimes to authors, I think.
Yeah. I want to go back to what you were saying about author branding and
Sure.
social media and that sort of thing,
Mhm.
because the running discourse in the private group texts out there, and I'm
Mhm.
not saying my private group text, but other people's private group texts, is how so many writers in film and TV and publishing are shooting themselves in the foot by saying the objectively worst things on social media. How does that hurt their brand image? How does that hurt their relationships with potential agents, with potential publishers, or even publicists like yourself? If you see a potential client who's like, oh, they're spouting weird nonsense online all the time.
Yeah, so that is something. And that's the thing, like I work in book publicity, which is not normally, like, it does not normally equate to like crisis publicity, and there's a
Yeah,
reason for that. It's not the same as like other industries where that is likely,
right.
So book publicity tends to be kind of,
A little more
authors are
tame.
good people, right? But I
Yeah,
have
sure.
had, I have had it happen a few times where there have been crisis incidents, either where, like I've represented crime fiction imprints, before where
Mhm.
um, an author will go off and do something, and it's like,
Yeah.
can you keep this author on the label, after they've done this thing, like there's
Hmm.
backlash, and like here's the opportunity, like I always encourage people to be transparent, like if for say for a publisher, for them to just come out and say, hey, this author did this thing and it does not represent our values, and we are parting ways or whatever it is. I've
Yeah.
had to both let go of clients that have done things that were, that did not align with my own values, and where I did not feel comfortable with that. And I've also, when I worked at the agency that I was at,
Hmm.
consulted on a few clients that were not the ones I was directly working with, but had done things that were, like that we would never have seen coming, right? Like these
Yeah.
things, it's just wild what people will do sometimes. And I think it is true. I do say when I'm, for me, when someone reaches out to me and says they would like for me to, offer a proposal for their book, I do like to have a meeting with them, like a Zoom meeting
Sure.
to, just to see how we vibe, right? Like
Yeah.
if we seem like, am I going to be happy to hear from this person every time my caller
Right.
ID shows up, am I going to
Yeah.
smile or am I going to cringe, And it's like, if I don't feel good about it, then, if they're saying things that, like, man, I just don't know. And then the second thing is that I need to read the book and really believe in the book,
So you
and
do
I
read your clients' books cover to
always,
cover.
always before I offer a proposal, and I think all good publicists do,
Hmm.
because first of all, you have to be able to figure out how you would represent that book. Like, do
Hmm.
I understand this book? And is it a book that I feel I know how I would position it in the market? But also, am I passionate about this book? Or does
Hmm.
this book have anything in it that I feel uncomfortable about, and that
Hmm.
I would feel not great? And part of the reason for that is because all publicists have contacts, who trust them. And so if I reach out to, some crime fiction reviewers, they generally will feel like, okay, she likes this book. I have liked other books she sent me, so I'll probably like this
Hmm.
one too. But if I start sending them books that, you know, say it's a mystery and, a whodunit and, like the ending is really not satisfying, or,
Hmm.
it's a thriller and the pacing is off or something, then they won't trust me the next time, and
Yeah.
so you
So
do
even
have to.
publicists have to look at the quality of the manuscript itself.
Absolutely. And for me, one of the things one of the ways that I work best is to work with um, books that are being traditionally published rather than for self-published authors. I do, I can consult or I can offer like a DIY plan, and I can
Yeah.
recommend, publicity assistants to help them execute it, or, that they could contract themselves.
Right.
Um, but with traditionally published books, they've been vetted once.
Hmm.
So, it's like somebody read that book and offered someone a contract. And
Yeah.
so, and likely an agent, read the book. And so because of that,
So it's been
one of
vetted
the,
twice,
so it's been
essentially.
vetted twice. And
Yeah.
then one of the things that's helpful with that, and then if I read it, then it's been vetted 3 times, is that when I'm
Mhm.
reaching out to these people, whether it's New York Times or whoever it is, right? Um, like they understand that the book, if they get 100 books that week that they're trying to decide between, they'll go with the ones that have probably had someone vet them, as
Hmm.
opposed to a book that's self-published, right?
Yeah.
And it's not to say that the self-published book is not good. It's just that it's harder to get media coverage for it. So like traditional media
Yeah.
coverage. And so that's a lot of where, if you hire a publicist who specializes in earned media coverage, you can't, you have to have that ability to be able to do it. So I feel like I would be
Yeah.
able to offer a better return on investment. Now, there are certain PR and marketing firms that work really well with self-published authors, and I always can recommend those to people too.
Yeah.
And then I also too, like I said, if I do a DIY plan for somebody, we'll take an hour on the phone and go through like all the ways that I think will be successful. It's just that
Sure.
it's a much lower investment. So I feel good about being able to give somebody a good return on their investment that way.
Yeah, and it's an industry built like every other industry built on
Yeah.
relationships. And if
Hmm.
you have a relationship with the New York Times or the New Yorker, you don't want to risk that by sending them a book that you don't believe in.
Right. That's true. And that's not to say that every time I send them a book, they take it, but they
Yeah.
do open my emails and they have taken them.
Hey, opening an
So
email,
yeah, well,
it's
opening
hard
an email
enough.
is, that's part of the battle. And then I
Yeah.
think, like the New York Times, I've had several books that have been featured there. The New
Name
Yorker.
drop some books.
Sure.
Over
So
here.
Tracy Clark,
Uh-huh.
who is her Detective Harriet Foster series,
Hmm.
has gotten great acclaim. And then who else? Who else? I'm trying to think of crime fiction authors particularly, but
What does that be?
let me see.
Anybody that you think recently
So
kind of hit the mark.
sure. So I think. Oh, the most recent, or one of the most recent ones, was Bob Johnson, who is a short story, very dark, like Midwestern Gothic short story
All
author.
right, Continental
And
Divide.
but Continental Divide, and he
Uh-huh.
was the New York Times hired Stuart Dybek to write a review, who is
Oh.
also, very well-known Midwestern Gothic
Hmm.
writer. So yeah, he got a phenomenal review there. I've also had other short story collections they have a short story column that have been selected for that.
Uh-huh.
Brian Grewley, who is he's a Michigan writer,
Hmm.
but he won a Pulitzer Prize for journalism. And he was actually reviewed in the Washington Post, this last book that he had.
Uh-huh.
The Times didn't review him, but the Post did. And
Do you find that some publications, you don't have to say which ones, I guess, but like
mhm.
some publications matter a little bit more than other publications amongst the major publications anyway, like between the Post and the New York Times, the New Yorker, USA Today,
Mhm.
et cetera.
Yes. I do think that the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Wall Street Journal are the only ones who have a dedicated books column anymore
Hmm.
for daily newspapers. And so their endorsement carries a lot of it certainly helps a little bit with sales, of course,
It does
but
move the needle,
it does move
newspapers
the
still.
needle.
Yeah.
But I think it also too it will generate other media. One of the things that with Bob Johnson's book, was that once that came up, then all of a sudden several podcasts, like
Oh,
NPR type podcasts were calling, wanting to, like have him on the show because they had read that review
yeah,
and they're like, oh, okay. So it won't generally cause competitors to, like, the Washington Post didn't see that and say, oh, we didn't review this. We should.
sure, yeah.
But people who are not competing with that media, if they see something that's successful that way, they'll do that. I had Daniel Kraus, who he wrote Whale Fall, and he's written a lot
Oh,
of
yeah.
George Romero tie-ins, and
Uh-huh.
the filmmaker. He had
Yeah, yeah.
published a horror novel, and there was the New York Times did a story on him, for that, and then that got picked up by I think it's Pittsburgh. They have a Romero museum. So they
Hmm.
called and wanted to do an interview with him, because they had seen the thing in the New York Times. And then, like in
Yeah.
Los Angeles, something happened too. So it was,
The
it's like,
snowball effect.
right, it sure
Right.
does. There was a celebrity biography I had done where this was kind of fun, actually. It was a biography on the 50th anniversary of the Barbara Streisand Robert Redford movie, The Way We
Uh-huh.
Were. And it was written by an entertainment journalist, Bob Hoffler. And so when that book came out, the New York Post actually ran, as the New York Post would do, a piece where the highlight of it was this section in the middle where it, was behind the scenes where apparently during the under the covers love scene, Robert Redford was so nervous about Barbara Streisand, who was being very aggressive with him, that he wore not one but two jock straps under the covers. So of course, like Entertainment Weekly immediately called and they're like, send me the book and tell me what chapter they got that from. So
Right.
that was like that quote, like Robert Redford and his two jock straps, was ended up everywhere, so it is, like I said, the New York Post does not do so much with reviews, but they will do
Yeah.
book roundups and they will do
Mhm.
like celebrity type features, for things like that too.
Yeah, and like I'm sure none of this like leads to thousands and thousands of more sales, but again, it's those little building blocks. Even with the major publications, they're still like, it's got to kind of build to this larger sort of buzz around a
It
property or a
can.
book.
One thing that does move the needle pretty quickly is TV, and
Mm.
that's the most competitive of all.
Yeah.
But I was working with an author, Lydia Kang, who writes a lot of just all different kinds of, she writes YA, she writes historical.
Hmm.
She's a doctor and she had teamed up with a journalist and written a book called Quackery. And it was all
Oh
these
yes.
quack cures through history.
Uh-huh.
And during COVID, when we were being advised to take what was it called? The hydroxychloroquine as a cure
Yeah.
for COVID, right? The
Right.
administration was saying, oh, here's what you should do. So CBS Sunday Morning called me and they said, can you send that book? And, like we want to
Mm.
talk to her. So they read the book and they had Mo Rocca interview her. And I got to sit on the interview. It was a Zoom interview because COVID.
Uh-huh.
And so they were asking her all kinds of questions about, like, first of all, like, is hydroxychloroquine, you're a doctor,
Right.
is it? And she's like, no, so then they're like, okay, well, what are some other quack cures? And they were talking about these different things. And, so she talked about, and then, so she talked about many of them and some of them were quite funny, but she did that day, like that segment aired and I think the book, which was a couple years old by then, sold
Hmm.
another like 800 copies,
Oh
like just
wow.
that morning. So
Yeah.
that landed her a contract for another book.
Yeah, and just as a side note, how the algorithms work, once you sell like 800 copies in a day, doesn't it kind of bump up on Amazon and
Oh,
get
for
your,
sure.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. There was another author too who had done like Good Morning America or Today Show. I don't remember which one. It was, several years ago,
yeah,
but it was the same thing. It was like that morning, all the stuff came up. But then the other thing that was helpful too was that they wanted guest columns from her. So
mm,
like whatever shows were on that, like she was watching a lot of, like popular TV shows. So she could write little, she was she is a psychologist and a relationship expert. And that's
mhm,
what they had her on the show for.
yeah,
But so she was doing like little things for like today.com,
Hmm.
about like her take as a psychologist or her take as a relationship expert on whatever show, that.
Yeah, we had a writer that was a finalist with us. He later adapted that script to a book called Blood at the Root, Ladarian Williams, and
Wow.
he got a book deal from Penguin. I think it's Penguin.
Hmm.
I hope it's Penguin. Fact check myself. And Today's Show, Good Morning America. I mean, they put some
Wow.
money into like promoting this book. It's basically like Harry Potter and HBCU, which is like the easiest pitch, and it's a great
Yeah.
pitch, right? For
Right,
a book.
exactly. Like who doesn't want that guest?
Yeah, right. And he's very, personable, and he's got a great backstory. We actually profiled him on Pipeline Artists, did a deep dive profile. Great backstory, inspiring backstory. And that was like the perfect candidate to do a big media push on.
Hmm.
So my question to you is that how much does the subject matter of the book and how relevant it is matter to get those big, not just earned media, but just everything in general?
Well, I think, that's a good point. And I think it does help. It's not completely necessary, although
Hmm.
it is, I think with every book, it's like there isn't something where it's like everybody is the same as everybody else.
Yeah.
Now, like you said, some people are a super easy sell. Like it's just, you walk in and it's like everybody's going to want this book. Everybody's going to want this
Yeah.
story, like that. Having an author like that to work with opens many doors for you for other authors, to walk through
Hmm.
also. But I also think that, like if you look at what just anything that's unique about, any author, you can present it in such a way that oh, this is how this is interesting. So with Bob Johnson and the Continental Divide, um, the interesting thing about him is that he's publishing a debut short story collection that's like, getting a lot of recognition, and it's his debut and he's 74,
Mm.
and so that's an interesting thing, like maybe it's counterintuitive. It's like, it'd be a very easy sell if he were 14 and had this phenomenal thing, but it's like, no, he went to the
Yeah.
Iowa Writers Workshop, got scared, quit writing, went to work as a high school teacher, and then produced a TV show or,
Extraordinary.
like morning news
Yeah.
show or something. And then when he retired, he started writing again, and everybody was like, you're pretty good.
Yeah.
So, it's like that to me was the unique thing. And,
Yeah.
so, and I think, with different people, it's like, if the author, and I think that goes back to what you were talking about with an author brand. It's like, okay, how does their real life intersect with what they're writing? So if someone
Right.
is a doctor and they're writing a book that includes something, anything related to being, you know, health, or whatever it
Hmm.
is, right? It's like that gives them a little bit of,
Legitimacy
credibility.
too. Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Exactly. Like you expect that, someone has a career in police work or as a lawyer, that they're going to be able to write good crime fiction, you
hmm.
know?
Yeah,
It gives
I've
them,
managed to work this in on every single podcast episode, but writers have to write something that feels personal to them, whether it's their career, whether it's their experience, whether it's a belief that they feel strongly about, because that's going to show on the page and the book's going to be better usually.
absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. And I think that the best fiction too comes from people asking questions that they don't know the answer to necessarily. I mean, you have to figure it out. And with crime fiction specifically, you have to figure it out, by the time you're maybe three-quarters of the way through the book.
Yeah.
And then go back and, there's a craft, to that so that the story is told in the best way. But I think that if somebody starts out writing a book where they say, you know, I'm going to write a book about how like misogyny and women hating is wrong. And, like I know that my book is going to, I believe that, but I know I'm going to be hitting people over the head with my message rather than telling a good story because I'm having to prove
Yes.
my point. Whereas if I just start asking a question that I'm not really sure what the answer is, it might just be like, what if, I don't know, like, maybe an odd couple reference, like, what if a woman who feels very strongly about being treated as an equal is, stuck working with someone she can't I don't know,
Yeah, they're stuck
um,
on a desert island or
right,
something.
stuck on a desert island with someone who does not believe that,
Yeah.
like what happens next, or what happens if there's a little bit of a complication? Like what if, this woman is raising a child who doesn't believe that? Well, she can't just walk off and, leave them. She could,
Yeah,
but,
you have to
it's
build
like,
in
yeah,
automatic conflict, I would call it,
right. And
where you can
also,
see it just based on the pitch.
right. And well, and also too, just like putting some characters together and seeing what happens,
Yeah.
like, and it maybe not knowing for sure. Like my feeling is that in the authors, many authors that I've talked with, it's like if they're not quite sure what's going to happen, if they allow themselves to be surprised, they're more likely to surprise their reader too, in a good way.
Yes.
That's not a trick,
Yes, which is why I'm somewhat of a proponent of not even outlining, just out getting a
Mhm.
framework of the story you want to tell and then just writing
Mhm.
it and letting it kind of flow in its own way. Just get a few good
Mhm.
characters and let them figure it out.
Yeah, yeah, that's the old plotter versus pantser,
Yeah.
like approach to writing. And I do think that most successful writers do take that approach where they don't outline, at least not until they get, a
Yeah.
certain ways into the book and they're like, okay, I know what I've got here. Now where do I need to go? And then they start,
Yeah. It depends on the genre too. If
yeah,
it's an intricate
yeah.
crime mystery, I can't imagine not outlining that.
Right, right. At least at some point,
Right.
But I do agree. I think that there's a lot to be said there for, like being able to just sit down and write some characters and see what happens and have that conflict, like start out with a
Yeah.
conflict and then, put some characters together on a page and, see if they fight or, you know, um,
Right.
like what happens, who shows up next,
Yeah.
and
Michelle, you can cut this out starting now. I just had a, well, I don't want to talk about myself on the,
mm,
especially, we got a comment, Michelle, by the way. Again, you can cut all this out. Um, I could just text it to her later, but someone was kind enough to listen to our last episode and emailed some feedback and was like, maybe the host should like stop talking about like each other and like focus on the guest. I'm like, what are you talking? All we do is focus on the guest. God forbid Michelle and I chat about Austin or something. Anyway, but my question. So again, I just
Mhm.
since you're here, I'm just going to ask you.
Yes, please. Yeah.
So my own book, I wrote more of an
Mhm.
upmarket like YA thing, but I wanted it to be this
Oh
sort of
yeah.
spin on a coming of age story because I really don't like coming of age stories because they're all about like romance and like 13-year-olds in love, and I'm like, what? That's not 13-year-olds shouldn't be falling in love, first of all.
I
But
know.
even with that one, this is less of a question, just more of a general statement. I'm curious what your thoughts
Mhm.
are on how writers sort of approach this. But like, it's very personal, but it's also like this is completely like not a plot I experienced or a story I experienced, but the themes are
Mhm.
very personal.
Mhm.
When a writer, and this is more of a craft question than a publicity question, but it does kind of tie in on how you market it later.
Mhm.
How focused should a writer be before they even start writing or outlining or conceptualizing even on finding a topic that they can later more easily talk about in terms of the marketing of it, where they can have a book conversation on the Today Show or something and say why they wrote that book.
Well, I think that's the thing. I think that's part of the discovery process. I don't think that that's an important thing
Mm,
to look at when you're starting out. I think when you're starting out, it's kind of like you write the book you want to write, or you write the book that
mm,
tells you,
hmm
like the book that's coming to you, or the story that wants to tell itself, the story that you are drawn to. And then once the first draft is done, that's when you start looking for like the themes and the symbolism and what's rising up out of it. And at that point, you
hmm
can go up and like the symbolism usually comes from objects or the place, right? Like something like either this
Yeah.
keychain keeps showing up or, the sword and the stone or something,
hmm
like it's, like there's something there. So then you can be like, oh, like they have a favorite set of sneakers or whatever it is. So how can I layer these sneakers or whatever? And then the themes, as they start coming up, you can be like, oh man, I thought this was about this, but this is really about this other thing,
hmm
And so some of it is subconscious, like you said, some of it is like themes
Totally.
that you understand, like even if the conflicts aren't ones you experienced, it's like the feelings, are you're able to draw on those to write well. So then you can start looking at, and the themes tend to be able to be moved into something that's pretty universal, that everyone can, even if it's like everyone, especially in a young adult novel, everyone experiences like insecurity and guilt and shame and
Yeah.
excitement and frustration and, like all these things.
Right.
And then external conflicts too, like what's happening in the time and place. And that's also where a lot of symbolism and themes rise up. Like, is it set
Yeah.
now or is it set like in the 70s or set in the 90s or whatever? What was going on out in the world?
Yeah.
And that can affect what's happening with the character too. Like,
For
was
sure.
there so many different things. So yeah, this is a fun
Yeah.
conversation to have. Yeah.
Yeah. No. So I
For
mean,
the
in a
two of
nutshell,
us. Yeah.
right. 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 No.
Yeah.
No. Michelle, leave this in because I like her answer.
Okay.
It's so in a nutshell, you're saying that it's what I believe too, and didn't realize it until you mentioned it. Like the author doesn't really know what they're trying to say until after they've written it and let it digest themselves. That's definitely what happened to me. I know that's happened with other authors who are writing stuff that's a little more, whether it's more cerebral or a little bit more literary or a little bit more, character driven than plot driven. They tend to discover that later, sometimes years later. Sometimes a reader will bring it up and they'll be like, oh, I did mention that. I didn't even realize it. And that's kind of a fun little discovery process too.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that I've heard authors say that, where somebody will say something to them and they'll be like, oh my gosh, like you're absolutely right. And it never occurred to me. But I do think that that's one of the things that makes writers a good self-editor. And I think it's important to be a good self-editor. But once it's done, to go back and look it over with that kind of an eye, like
Mm-hmm.
what are the patterns in my story? Even before you go back in and like, everybody has to go back in and like tighten it up and, figure out what's missing and what have I got here with this big, lovely mess. But I think the first thing to look at is patterns.
Yeah.
And, also too, sometimes people use special software, like Scrivener or whatever,
Right.
so they can like look at different things. They can move things around and look at like, where are my longer chapters? Where are my shorter chapters? Where are the chunks of text?
Mm-hmm.
Are there different parts and are they balanced well? Or, like just looking at the mechanics of the book too can offer some clues as to what might be missing or what might be ripe for cutting, or
Yeah.
whatever. Or also too, like maybe where the book actually starts on page 30, or I don't need all this
Mm-hmm.
backstory and I can work it in later, or whatever it is, like there's
Yeah.
just so many clues you can get from just looking for patterns.
We can definitely cut this part out, Michelle. However,
Okay.
I did do like the Adobe AI analysis of my own book
Mhm.
just to
Oh,
see
yeah.
like, I asked it like, what are the major themes? What are some things?
Hmm.
And it came up with like a legitimately good analysis of stuff I had no idea I was doing. It's like, oh, this parallels the Greek mythology of this, 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 and this. I'm like, holy shit, it does somehow.
Yeah.
I mean, some of it's random. I think you see what you want to see. Even
Yeah.
the bot will see what it wants to see and make
Right.
those connections. So you can kind of do that, I'm sure, with almost any story. But it was just terrifyingly illuminating of what the computer had to say. So,
It's true. And I think, like as publicists, we've been looking for a long time at what AI will do. I mean, it's here to stay. Like there's no putting that genie back in
yeah,
the bottle, right? Same thing
yeah.
with, everybody was scared, 15 years ago about ebooks. Like, is it going to be the death of publishing? And
It was
and
the
it wasn't.
opposite eventually.
Right.
Yeah, no one
Right.
was
But
right.
so with AI, it's like, okay, some comedian had a good take on it where she was like, can some of these AI robots be trained to pick trash out of the ocean, or do they all have to be screenwriters? And I
Right.
think, it's like, it's true. It's like they're
Yeah.
all, it's going to take our jobs, it may. And there is a lot they can do, but there's also a lot of tasks that they can do that do make life easier,
It enhanced the
and one of
creative
those things,
process. God forbid I
yeah.
say that, but it's
Mhm.
true, to an
Yeah,
extent.
it's true. And like I know teachers who are just like, okay, we can't fight it, so I know I'm going to get, 30 AI generated English lit papers.
Yeah,
So
that was
what they
tough.
do is, well, what some of them are doing is saying, okay, print the AI version and then you tell me how you would fix it. Like, how would you improve it?
Well,
Which I'm
that's
like,
smart.
okay, that's good. Like, they're going to do this. So just have them do it. And then,
That's
you
actually
know,
really smart because now it forces you to do your own research, your own
right.
editing, and
Hmm.
then now it puts you in a place of superiority over the machines,
Right.
right?
Right. So, and then it gives them something where, it's kind of like, okay, like it actually makes it a little bit better than having, because I remember like even, 15, I mean, I teach college and,
Uh-huh.
and I teach in creative programs. And so I
Yeah.
was always having to like, like put a string of text into Google and having it search and just see if it showed up, somewhere
Sure.
as plagiarized material if something just sounded weird.
Yeah.
And so this is something where, like it's like, okay, well, we know that this is there, so go ahead and do it. And then, like how can we, and I think that's the thing with AI. It's like, how do we use it to not, I mean, we could talk about this for hours
No,
too,
this is a
because
separate podcast
it's a
episode. It's
whole
really
separate
interesting too.
conversation.
Yeah.
It is. I mean, there's a lot of things where it's like, okay, well, how much do we even need analysis if AI is going to do it all for us? And, clearly we no longer need, like nobody knows how to spell anymore. Nobody knows how to use apostrophes, like there's all these things, right?
Yeah.
So are those skills that are being taught even, like do we need instead to have students focusing instead of on basic reading and writing skills on like collaboration skills or, I don't know. Like
Yeah. I
there's so
just
many,
I
yeah.
love the idea of like, hey, here's a short story that was completely written by AI. Tell us why it sucks and then make it better. And you'll have 50
Mhm.
different versions that are probably better, right?
Right.
And now
Right.
you've taken you've eliminated the power dynamic, I guess,
Mhm.
of the AI bot and like proving that, human intelligence is still going to be superior. I'm going to steal
Yeah.
that idea too. I'm going to
No,
find
I
a
think it's, yeah.
there's like a NaNoWriMo's gone now, so people have to do something in November. There has to be something
Right.
where it's like it's relevant, but also like kind of a middle finger to AI. You
Yeah,
know?
that's excellent because you're right. It's something where if we look at, okay, it's here and yes, like F off AI, but at the same time, like how do we make it work for us? And I know that we're all scared that AI is like stealing what we're doing and making it its own. And
Right.
that's kind of weird. But at the same time, having fun with it kind of takes the fangs out of it too, I think.
Yeah.
A little bit. It's
Yeah.
still a major concern.
We'll have you back
Yeah.
on next year to talk about
Okay.
AI
Yeah, we can do that.
from the
Yeah.
professor's perspective.
Yes, we can
Um,
we can do that.
let me end with this. Who are some of the authors that you think are on the rise that no one's really quite talking about yet?
Well, there are several. So I think some who are, one of my favorites, of course, is Tracy Clark, who is steadily on the rise.
Hmm.
Um, and I also think, as we mentioned, Bob Johnson is his next book, I believe, is going to be a novel. So he's
Hmm.
certainly one to watch. I think David Ellis, who is a um, crime fiction author, but he's also a judge and he's a
Hmm.
former prosecutor. He was the prosecutor for in the trial of former Illinois Governor Rod Blagojevich, who
Oh,
went to prison for selling Barack Obama's Senate seat.
all right.
And so he was that prosecutor, and then but he's also like writes crime fiction novels, and he's quietly building like massive sales on his books.
Hmm.
Which I think is great. I also love Michael Cardos, is
Oh,
a crime fiction author who is a also a professor. He for 12 years co-directed the creative writing program at Mississippi State.
hmm.
I also think there are who else is on the oh, you know who else is really good? Ziva Bukai, Bukai.
Hmm.
She writes literary fiction, very family-centered stories. Her debut was called The Anatomy of Exile, and it's a stunner.
Hmm.
I feel like and her second book is coming out next year. I think she's great. There's also, let's see, Nancy Allen, who is also, oh, you know who else? Yeah, Nancy Allen writes short stories and they're really dark and they're set like in Taos, New Mexico, and
Uh-huh.
really, really good. Also, a new debut author who's coming out is Radha, Radha, Lynn Chadha, Chaddah. and she's writing like an epic book club saga that got snapped up before it even went to auction. And it's set in around the time of the Cultural Revolution in China, the Mao Zedong, right after that, the story of a couple families and what's going on with them.
Uh-huh.
And then
I've noticed as I've been looking them up, a lot of them, I like to see it. I love to see it. Older authors that are just kind of finding their momentum.
Yeah, Nancy Allen for sure, is, like just, and I see that a lot, actually. I see a lot of times people, they have a career and then maybe their kids grow up or something happens or they retire and they start writing more heavily. And then all of a sudden they realize, like they're getting a lot of attention, they're winning awards, they're getting things published. And I think that that's, a really exciting thing.
Well, with age comes more stories to tell, right?
Yeah,
You're like more qualified in a way.
And also too, like age doesn't prevent you from like joining in. It's like after a certain age, like you're no longer probably going to get drafted by the NFL or, be able to become a world-class gymnast or whatever
I don't know about this week.
I don't know.
The week of October 15th, 2025. We got Joe Flacco. We got Aaron Rodgers.
I know. It's like, they're, we're going to look at, maybe somebody's mom will get drafted, but
right. Bringing back Dan Marino on Sunday.
Right, exactly. But I do think that, that's one of the wonderful things about writing is that you can truly start at any age and it's not a zero-sum game either. It's not like, this person wins and nobody else. It can be very collaborative, that whole universe. And that's my favorite thing about writing as opposed to maybe acting where, somebody gets that role you don't. But in writing, like everyone can have a juice box and a trophy, right? Like everyone can get published. But it's a good thing. It's a true and honest thing. And so it feels good. It's kind of like together we lift each other up. And I think that that's one of the most amazing things about working in publishing, is just how good people are to each other, and how people really want to, again, be a good literary citizen, like support each other and celebrate each other.
Yeah. I think we'll end on that.
Okay.
A positive for once on this podcast.
I know. Yes, the world is a chaotic place, but in the world of books, there's a lot of comfort, for sure. And a lot of importance too. A lot of necessary stories and, good comfort. So. Yeah. Yeah.
Julia Borcherts or Julia Borchet, depending on what region of France you're calling her from. For more on Julia, it's juliapublicity.com. Julia, is there anything else you'd like to add as far as where to follow you on social, et cetera?
So I am on Instagram and on Facebook under my name. And as Matt said, you can just look me up on the website. And if you have any questions at all, just shoot me an email and I'm happy to talk to you about it.
Wonderful. Julia, thank you for being on. I'm sorry that Michelle wasn't here, but you know what? I think we did fine.
Yeah.
With that. I love you, Michelle.
Yeah, I know. I think she'll look
great.
Miss you, Michelle.
Yeah.
So, all right.
Wonderful. Thank you. On the next episode of How the Arts Were Won, I have no idea, but it'll probably be another author. So thank you for listening, and see you next time. Some of them like spike because they spike, but whatever. But yeah, this one I'm going to roll out to the Book Pipeline audience and really push it because I think so many authors should be listening to it. So hopefully we get a little bit more listens.
Oh, it's fabulous.
And we'll roll out on social, tag you on Instagram, all that, et cetera, et cetera.